Behaviour caved into killer mains. Are you kidding me? Sadly, I knew they would. This from the Dead by Daylight Steam discussion forums. I guess it may be time to find a new game to play. I'm so tired of Behaviour not keeping their word, always at the expense of Survivor's solo queue, and always walking back changes to appease crying killer mains. I play both roles, and play fairly on both sides, thus was really looking forward to the changes since I don't tunnel, camp, or slug, and was so happy Behaviour was finally doing something to stop the toxicity, abuse, and exploitation of the game, and attempt to make the game fun and fair once again for all players. I thought they were going to attempt to put an end to the game being played in a way in which it was never intended nor designed to be played. Truly, how sad and tragic this is. I'm so over this wishy-washiness on their part. With all due respect, it's completely unfair to just scrap it all, in my opinion. Given this, why doesn't Behaviour just walk back the survivor prevention changes that the survivors didn't want as well? It's only fair, don't you think? I'm so done with it all. Just go ahead and replace Survivor players with bots at this point and be done with it. Survivor players are dropping like flies and have been for quite some time now. They are just over it. It's just not fun anymore, being hard tunneled out for the 1v3 and slugged all the time. Respectfully, this is not a strategy. It's abusing an exploit for a competitive edge, and a toxic one at that. Honestly, it's just so sad. This game used to be so much fun. Magical, even. Once upon a time. Now, here's the thing about Dead by Daylight. It is literally set up in a way that allows killers to play as they choose. And survivors sometimes just need to accept that that is a part of playing the game. I don't disagree that Behaviour is kind of wishy-washy. We went through this in September of 2022, you might recall, when they tried adding Base Kit Unbreakable to the game, and it really didn't quite work. But that wasn't the fault of Base Kit Unbreakable, it was the fault of the last survivor standing, where if all survivors are slugged, the killer can simply mori that fourth survivor and everyone else dies. That really didn't work because unfortunately you had killers like Oni or Nurse or Blight that were able to move around the map very quickly, get their 4 slugs, and then just end the game. The thing about this particular update, 9.2, is they simply tried to do too much at once. If they had simply stuck with a couple of the basics, like maybe just implementing the base kit Unbreakable again, and with 90 seconds, I think that would have been fine. If it had been 2 90-second base kit Unbreakables, well then a survivor could only pick themselves up twice in a bleed out. I also think there's nothing wrong with incentivizing the killer on hooking unique survivors. They really could have gone ahead and given the killers that boost to gen regression. I don't see anything wrong with that. The issue with this particular PTB, it was too much. And it was too much even for the game in general. There's already so much to keep track of in Dead by Daylight. Adding in all of these additional pieces as far as anti-tunneling and anti-slugging goes, it just didn't work. I hope that Behaviour does revisit this. They said they will be, and that we will hopefully see some of these things coming through. Really, it was way too much. There were a couple other posts as well that chimed in. The devs buckled hard on changes. Again, any bit of pressure from players with low hours, and they immediately buckled. I'm pretty positive that any proposed changes to tackle cheesy, low-hanging fruit tactics is going to be met with resistance. So they're to buckle every time? There wasn't even any survivor buffs, it was just anti-cheese, whereas killers got base kit barbecue and pop goes the weasel, which helps them kill faster. Survivors actually got nothing in terms of doing gens faster. Very weak from the devs. And then we also had, they didn't listen. They manipulated you. They never were going to go through with the update. They just needed to get on your good side after the Walking Dead streaming disaster. Now, don't get me wrong, the Walking Dead streaming business was a disaster. But all of these changes, I guarantee you, were well in development before that happened. There's no way they added all those additional things as part of the PTB without literally going back months. And they had been talking about making these changes since last year. So in fairness, no, it wasn't to try and get on people's good side. They know that there's some unhealthy pieces to the way slugging and tunneling has been working in the game, mainly due to the meta of perks that they themselves have built. But regardless, they've been working on it for a while. Do I think that these changes need to come into play in order for Dead by Daylight to remain in a healthy space? Perhaps. I think the main thing is we're looking at a game that is late in its health It is far more complicated than it used to be. It has a lot of moving parts that make it difficult for newer players. I don't entirely blame killers that are new for potentially tunneling because they don't necessarily know what else they can do. They haven't learned how the perks work yet for themselves, never mind the survivor side as well. I literally just had a game against a tunneling nurse yesterday, and sure enough, when we went and looked at the player's profile, they only had 87 hours in the game. So I couldn't fault them for doing what they felt they had to do, when really the biggest issue is teaching players how to play the game effectively. Right now, the game does a terrible job of doing that. And the problem is Behaviour keeps pumping out more content, more perks, more killers with new powers, that it just makes it harder and harder for newer players to get in on the ground level and feel like they know what they're doing. They need to, I think, slow down the content releases. They need to go back to their tutorial, and they need to figure out ways that they can better train survivors and killers up front, and then also how to continue that training as they're playing the game. Because really, past the tutorial, what do you get? You get tooltips on load up for the first couple times you're up against a new killer you haven't seen before, and then nothing. And I think tooltips in-game would be excellent. There were a couple tooltips I spotted during the PTB that popped up that kind of was like, oh, yes, that's the direction they need to go. You're exposed. What does that mean? What's that little icon over there? The killer's using a particular add-on. How is that affecting you in this moment? And not that they need to be there all the time. I think they could operate similarly to the tooltips during load-in. That would really, really help survivors and killers as they're playing understand what's going on in the game. Because right now, everybody's just kind of thrown to the wolves as a new player. And Dead by Daylight is very, very heavily leaning on the community to help teach people to learn how to play the game. I don't think that's right. In any case, I look forward to seeing what they do moving forward from the 9.2 PTB. I am looking forward to the release of the Crossu. I think it's a very interesting killer. I look forward to them trying out some adjustments on some of the changes they wanted to make when it comes to anti-slugging and anti-tunneling, and I don't think that we should fault them for trying. I really appreciate that they work as hard as they do, keeping their game up to date, adding new content. I do think they need to, again, slow down and focus on health of the game. They need to make that their #1 priority. I think the pace of the content releases right now is absurd and unsustainable. What do you think about the 9.2 PTB? Let me know in the comments and follow for more.